If an alien race ever invaded planet Earth, these are the video games that I would present to them to kind of summarize the human race and all of our accomplishments. Hopefully that would keep me from getting probed up the butt or anything like that. Although I will say these alien creatures will probably be traumatized because there's nothing worse than getting like mooned by hairy ass cheeks. I've made this point before, but I'll reiterate it. There's no reason for these alien creatures to travel across galaxies and dimensions only to do something like that. It feels like whoever came up with this theory is just projecting like their darkest desires. We're getting completely off topic here. I don't know how we started talking about alien probes, but today we have another top 5 list. We're going to be looking at the top 5 GameCube video games of all time. Again, as is the case, this is my personal opinion. Everybody has their own, and I'm sure you do as well. Let your opinion be heard. Let me know in the comment section what the top 5 GameCube games of all time are. If your list is different from mine, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just probably means you have awful tastes in video games. Anyways, let's get straight into it. Let's start off with number 5. We have Resident Evil number 4. If you're a diehard fan, you've been waiting for the re-release, which is just right around the corner. But the original one was released in 2005 for the GameCube. It was developed by Capcom Production Studios and also published by Capcom. This is one of the first few games to really popularize the over-the-shoulder camera angle, which not only added another layer of difficulty, but also made some of the encounters with the infected just that much more frightening and immersive. The enemies for Resident Evil number 4 were actually really complex and intricate. They could not only dodge attacks, but now they could also wield weapons, which made the experience that much more intense. The enemies were also a lot more responsive to your attacks. Depending on where you shot them or where you hit them, the infected would react accordingly. The game did change up the formula just a little bit, considering the ammunition wasn't as scarce, which is kind of one of the bigger staples for this franchise, which really was an indicator of what was to come, because Resident Evil number 5 and 6 were definitely a lot more action oriented. And you can definitely see the change of direction happening very slowly with Resident Evil number 4. The story itself was also very intriguing. You play as Leon, who is tasked with saving the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who is actually being held captive by a cult in some rural place in Spain. Most of the enemies that you encounter in this particular video game were all just simple farmers at one point, which makes killing them even that much more difficult. The video game was held for a lot of different things: the mechanic, the gameplay, the controls, even the voice acting. Everything came together perfectly. The setting and the maps just set up a very eerie feeling, which, like I said, ties this game perfectly. Definitely deserves to be one of the top 5 best GameCube video games of all time. Let's move on to number 4. I slotted Mario Kart Double Dash in this particular spot, which was released all the way back in 2003. This is one of the first few Mario games that actually uses 3D polygons instead of sprites. Please don't ask me what that really means. I just found it while doing research on this video game. I thought I would sneak it in there, but then I realized somebody might actually ask me what that means. But all in all, this definitely has to be probably the most creative, innovative Mario game in the franchise's history. It didn't just update the previous entry into the Mario Kart franchise, which was Mario Kart 64. It continued to build on the franchise as a whole, but not only that, they refined it and they nearly perfected the formula. The video game had a total of 16 tracks and there were 20 playable characters. It is also the second most sold GameCube video game of all time. The video game was unique in a number of different aspects, but the biggest calling card was the fact that 2 players could simultaneously control one cart. There could be somebody wreaking havoc and then somebody driving, but they could switch back and forth depending on who wanted to drive. As I said, the video game strived mostly for creativity and innovation, and that's where they arrived at. It was an extra layer of fun, but also an extra layer of complexity or variety involving how you wanted to handle every single race. There were also some battle modes, which I think is one of the more massively underrated game modes of the video game franchise as a whole. I think it's one of those that is overlooked, but it's an extremely fun game mode that tends to kind of break the monotony of just racing around in circles. I think it's a different change of pace for sure. Moving on to the third spot on our list, we're looking at Super Mario Mario Sunshine, a video game that was released in 2002 and was developed and published by Nintendo. It is also the third best-selling video game on the console. It was also the second 3D Mario video game released. The settings and the maps are absolutely beautiful. It looks like the prototypical perfect vacation for a working class plumber and a princess. Talk about being somebody that's completely out of your league. The main antagonist ends up being Bowser Jr., who is told by Bowser that Peach is his mother. Yes, you heard that correctly. There was a part of me that even as a kid found this a little bit disturbing, just the idea of Princess Peach cheating on Mario with Bowser himself. This ends up not being true, but just the thought of it definitely scarred me as a young child. Video game starts off with Peach and Mario just chilling, having a vacay, until Mario is basically framed for vandalizing the entire island, and he is ordered to clean it all up. But as I mentioned, this video game really does excel when it comes down to the scenery and the map design, as well as the exploration involved in this game. It was just as immersive as the original Nintendo 64 Mario video game, but with the added bonus of some updated graphics as well as some fantastic innovative features. Our second spot goes to Metroid Prime, a video game that was actually released in 2002. It was developed by Retro Studios and published by Nintendo. Retro Studios became incredibly famous for helping launch the Metroid franchise, which was a game that was only popular in Japan, really didn't have worldwide recognition yet. They also helped relaunch the whole Donkey Kong Country franchise. So overall, they had a relative amount of success with any project that they touched. Even though it was the first Metroid game that became popular in the States, it was the fifth installment in the franchise. It was the first 3D first-person Metroid video game. There were definitely a lot of things to love about the universe, and one of them was being that there were plenty of mysteries to solve, and the video game never really tried to tie you down. It pushed you to try to explore, which led to you being able to upgrade Samus's suit. The game also introduced some pretty intriguing puzzles, which broke up the monotony of the combat. It really varied up the game and kept it interesting enough. They were complex enough to keep you thinking for a couple of minutes, but they weren't going to break your brain either. The video game also encouraged you to travel as the Morph Ball, which again just continued to vary the gameplay and keep you interested for hours on end. This easily could have been the top spot on our list, but there's really no shame to losing to the number one spot, which goes to Smash Bros. Melee, a video game released in 2001, developed by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo. It is only the second entry into the Smash Bros. Universe, but it is officially the best-selling video game on the GameCube console, which, as you guys can imagine, is definitely not an easy feat to accomplish, especially considering there are absolute bangers on the GameCube console. The battles could become quite chaotic, especially since you could play 4 players simultaneously in some of these matches. Not only did you need the skills to be able to defeat your enemies, but you also had to have really good reflexes just to keep track of what was happening on screen. And there is a campaign and a storyline, but who cares? The strength of this particular franchise and this video game in specific has to be the multiplayer. That's where it really shines. There were a few unlockable maps as well as 11 unlockable characters, and even though Nintendo has released some great sequels to this franchise, this definitely holds its own, especially in an era where fighter games were really starting to take off. There was definitely more interest in investing in a fighter franchise, more so than in previous generations. But there you have our list, our top 5 GameCube video games of all time. As I always say, this is just my personal opinion. I'm sure I missed a video game here and there. Let me know in the comments section what your personal top 5 is. I thoroughly enjoyed making this video. It brought me back to a time where I had a bowl cut and walked around in whitey tighties in my house all the time. Definitely one of the most iconic consoles out there. So thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned, a lot more gaming content coming at you guys. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.